I am a bit confused on what I do with those hypotheses after I do learnings on the ad. If I have two assumptions on why it worked, do I try to isolate each hypothesis and create a completely new ad based on it? And if the new ad doesn't work, does it mean the hypothesis is wrong? So for those of you that don't know what he's talking about when we do learnings on ads. So when you actually pull up an ad and you review it and you're like, why is this working, right? And what he's saying is he has two assumptions on why it works. He's saying, hey, I think it worked because of X, and I think it worked because of Y. And what he's getting at here is when I go to like action these learnings, do I isolate them? Do I just make the same ad with that one change, or what do I do? And I'm assuming that he's probably spending less than $1,000 a day. If you're spending like over $1,000 a day, you can get more granular. But even then with Andromeda, like if you're just making a small change where you're like, oh, I think this clip is what's working, let me take this clip and just like spam it across. Like again, if you're at higher budgets, you kind of have more of a luxury of doing that. But if you're not, what I would recommend doing is just really breaking down your learnings into like the core areas. So this is stuff that I talk about in the copyright program, which is angles, mechanisms, authorities, awareness levels, and avatars. Those are like the 5 things that I try to break down. And so whenever I'm doing learnings on an ad, I'm going to try to identify all of those things. Like, hey, what awareness level is this? What avatar is this? What angle is this? What mechanism is being used? And what is the authority? And by looking at all of those things, if I can't spot any of them, then I will definitely make an ad where, for example, if I don't see like a mechanism being shown in the ad, then I will definitely make a variation of it that shows it. But to answer his question of like, hey, I just have these 2 reasons why I think they work, I'm going to go ahead and test this hypothesis. But if I test it and it's wrong, does that mean my hypothesis is wrong? And most of the time, no. And the reason why is because most of the time your ads don't work is because of execution. And so I might look at this and be like, oh, I think this authority is the reason why it's working. And then from there, I'll go make an ad where I focus more on the authority, but then I potentially lose some of the other elements. And as a result of that, I just make the ad worse. And then from there, I'm like, oh, well, that authority is not the reason why it worked. It's usually a lot of things that are making your ad work. So it's not always that your hypothesis is wrong. It's usually just because you kind of execute it the wrong way. But my point with this is it's fantastic that you're doing learnings. And if you do have hypothesis, just be aware of that execution issue. And so if you go and test your hypothesis and it doesn't work, there's probably one of 2 reasons why. Number 1, it's just too similar to the existing creative. Like maybe you didn't make a significant enough change for this creative to be seen differently from Meta. And that's what Andromeda essentially does. It just like groups creatives together. And it's like, hey, I'm just going to keep spending on this ad that is already spending, $300 a day and getting me sales versus this one that's basically the same thing with a tiny change. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is because you might have made it worse. And we see this happen all the time. And again, that's just like execution skill set issue where you're basically making the ad and you think it's better, but when you actually zoom out and you're unbiased and you look at the ad that you made versus the original ad, you actually made this one worse. And that happens more often than you think. And then the third reason why would be that, okay, maybe your hypothesis wasn't correct, but I would say that for most of you, when you're doing learnings, again, depending how good you are, it's going to be one of those 3 things. And so that's why I want to make you aware of it. So that way you don't come to like a hardcore conclusion, like, oh, this is the reason why. The only time that you should ever come to like a hardcore conclusion is if you're like, hey, this angle and this authority, and when we show this is working really well, and then you make an ad and it works again, and you're like, okay, let me do another ad, or let me do a different like visual type, like let me do a UGC video rather than an AI voiceover, and you do a UGC video following those 3 things, and then it works again. That's when you kind of can be more like set in stone, like, oh yeah, this is what works for us. But it's going to take more than just like one ad. It's going to take you to actually make another winner from those learnings that you had to actually be set in stone and confident. So that's the biggest thing that I want to avoid is you guys being set in stone, like, oh, that authority isn't the reason why it doesn't work. I don't want to use that authority anymore. Or like, oh, that mechanism isn't the reason why the ad's working. I don't need to talk about that mechanism. It's usually a lot of things that are making the ad work. And so don't ever be set in stone when you're doing learning. So hopefully that answers the question. And for those of you guys who are like, what is this guy talking about right now? The most important thing is that when you have something that's working, review the ad, jot down why you think it's working. And then those things that you jot down, try to formulate them into ad ideas so that you can test them. And again, don't go too granular or don't go too tiny with your changes. Like take some decently sized swings with this. And when I mean take a decent sized swing, like, hey, go ahead and maybe try to follow the same idea of the original ad and the same angle, the same avatar, everything that I just mentioned, but you could try writing it differently, maybe test different zones of valence and intensity and things like that. But my point is don't ever be like super set in stone, like, oh, my hypothesis was wrong. The only time you should ever be set in stone is when you actually consistently make winning ads. And that's how for a lot of brands, when we scale extremely fast, class, that is what happens is we find an ad that is working, we do learnings, and then those learnings lead to another winning ad and another winning ad and then another winning ad. And we're like, okay, yeah, we can confidently say that this is why it's working. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense.